Okay, I'm recording.
All right, looking at the waveform real quick. I think I'm okay.
Looking at mine. All is well.
All right, cool. Let's clap. 1, 2, 3.
My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently. Jason, this week I wanted to talk a little bit about how my Anglekite campaign has been going, and we've just hit kind of a mid-season finale because I'm going to take a 2-month break so that I can focus on a few other things that are going on, and then we're going to come back and finish it out. But spoilers ahead for anyone who doesn't want to know what happens in Anglekite, or at least some of the major story points that might happen in Anglekite, because it always kind of occurs differently depending on who's running it and what happens. So I've had the opportunity to have mostly the same players, and that's something that, you know, we don't always get to do with Dungeon World and how we run it for the Gauntlet. So that's been really
somewhat
neat.
Unusual, yeah. I tend to have like maybe 2 or 3 people who are pretty consistent, but then there's like that 4th or 5th spot always rotates out or whatever.
Yeah. I've had some players from the very beginning, and it's been really cool. And they're playing the same characters because no one's died. It's been really, really close sometimes, but no one has. Right. No one has died except for the one guy I turned into a ghost, but that doesn't really count. He chose that for himself. But yeah, it's been a really good run. Several cities have been destroyed off the face of the earth, as Anglekite games are wont to do. And most recently, the players were surviving dealing with this demon city pandemonium and the politics of all of that, and how demons do their work, trying to protect it from this great big 200-foot tall giant that's controlled by an evil entity that wants to destroy all life. So they're having to deal with that. They're having to deal with the politics, and in the background are these cultists getting up to something.
Well, so you said there's a 200-foot giant as well. Like, that seems like that would be a major thing to have to cope with in the world, I feel like.
Yeah, it's been there from the beginning. It's what brought them to that very first adventure when they rode on the giant, and then it wandered off. And
they rode that. Oh, that's the giant they rode. Okay.
That's the giant that they rode, that friendly giant. But it got corrupted by this evil alien force. These is just called the Thing from Outside. It's coming into this dimension, and it just wants destruction. And it took him over, and it's been terrorizing the entire world, basically, as it just slowly moves about. And I call this the mid-season finale because we saw the demise of this creature. The players were doing their very best to cope with it and fight it, and then as they were like kind of they nearly had it at hand, but they'd let this cult activity go on for too long, and it summoned forth the image that's on the cover of Anglekite, the pyre worm, this great big catastrophic force that's dragon-like, but I wouldn't say it's a dragon. It's much, much more like a force of nature than a dragon. And that came out and started obliterating the city that they were in, that the great big giant was also in. And the players all got pulled out by this interdimensional thieves guild that's a part of the setting that they had been working with. They had finally managed to steal the thing that the thieves guild wanted, so that's why I pulled them out. They were also just, the thieves guild who they work for is this evil deity who's just wanting to enslave everything and everyone and wants to own all things. He's just the book describes him as the actual, like, he's the most evil thing.
This is like the head of the Thieves Guild, or?
Yeah, he's kind of, he controls the dimension that they're getting pulled into, and it's where he keeps his palace, and the palace constantly just shifts at his whim. So it's just constantly shifting around. And I asked some painting the scene kind of questions for that. And we got some really cool answers where, people are like, oh, it's like that paint, or it's like that picture, that drawing where there's the staircases leading all over the place. Like, that's what's happening here. And it was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Just non-Euclidean architecture forming and then forming into something you can recognize. And
yeah, that's cool. I like that.
But they get to him, and I've got to do the voice for him. I'm not going to do it on the show, but he has a really high pitched voice, and he's very much he's very petulant. Like he wants it his way. And at one point, all of his minions are just capturing people from the demon city as it's being destroyed by the pyre worm. They're just stealing people and chaining them up. And they finally managed to steal the thing that he was most interested in, which was the 200-foot tall giant. And they bring it to his dimension, and this is when the players really get to see, this guy is bad news. As they're trying to chain up the 200-foot tall giant, he just gets mad and very petulantly breaks his own new toy, the 200-foot tall giant, by just slamming architecture into it until he's dead.
Awesome. Sounds pretty epic.
It was very epic in scale. We talked about it afterwards, and everyone was really feeling the tension as they're just having this conversation with this petulant godlike creature. And half of them, and the wizard had successfully cast a spell that let him speak to other players within their minds. And I just said, all of you have that right now because of the magical nature of this place. You're able to speak with all of them in their minds, and they're having this conversation. Should we just attack him? I don't think that we should attack him. This seems like a really bad idea, but how are we going to get out of here? And it turns out they just had to find the next thing that he wanted. And the next thing that he wants, and we'll see as we come back, is the angel bone blade, which is the other thing that is pictured on the cover. So, mid-season finale, because we're probably just going to have one or two more series of these, and then the world will either be destroyed or they will have successfully thwarted the destruction of Anglekite. So that's what's going on with me. It's giving me life.
Sounds pretty epic.
Great.
Yeah, sounds pretty epic. It's good. That's so interesting. I very rarely, actually never, I'll say, run Dungeon World at that really, really that big scale, that big scope. So I think that's super interesting. It's cool that the system can support so many different styles of play, right? Because I always go in for a more, a closer sort of set of circumstances, it's usually a little more, the stakes are usually a little smaller. The nature of the interactions with NPCs are a little bit more like on a sort of Game of Thrones level of kind of just sort of interpersonal kind of nature, as opposed to the characters getting up to really big world changing events, right? I think it's cool the system can kind of do both. It's kind of fun,
right? Yeah, and the nature of their interactions are largely that smaller scale. And they're having to try to figure out how to deal with these big problems because they're the ones who have been commissioned by the king to do it.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I say that, and then I have coming up on the AP what is coming up. So maybe we shall see how I do large epic scale play, I think, before this episode is over. So.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, but that's all I really wanted to say. Just kind of gush about Anglekite and how it's going, and how happy I am with a really longer length game that I've been able to run. So it's been very satisfying. Shout out to all my players. Awesome. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For?
So I wanted to talk about Swordbreaker. Swordbreaker is a zine that has been recently put out by Logan Howard, who's a friend of the show and of the Gauntlet. And I think as of the moment of this recording, he's already up to 3 issues of Swordbreaker. They're coming out pretty fast. I've only looked at the first one so far, and I think that's the one I want to talk about a little bit. Have you looked at it yet?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to read it earlier, and man, I was really flattered that he mentioned us in the boilerplate.
We were mentioned kind of as like he gave us like some nice little kudos, I guess, which was pretty cool. I'm always into stuff like that. It's flattering, it's nice, it kind of validates what we do a little bit, right, which I like. It's cool. So I will say at the outset that it's pretty clearly like a passion project, right? I mean, the art is all stock art, and well, at least in the first issue, I think he's got some drawings for the second and third issue, but for the first issue, it's stock art, and the layout is, kind of, it's not a professionally done layout, right? But I think he knows that, right? Because he's going for like a real, like kind of true, like zine, kind of thing, right? Like real DIY kind of, look to it. Setting that aside, though, the substance of what's in the issue is quite good. The first one, it's called the Tyrant Machine is the name of the overall zine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the Tyrant Machine.
Yeah, the Tyrant Machine. And it's essentially kind of like it's like a sort of expanded starter, basically, involving this like baron this like evil baron, and like his castle, and like this sort of like entities and other things that are around the castle, and some of the other like kind of NPCs that are important. Like it's a cool, it's a little bit like Ray's Plundergrounds thing, in that the whole zine is about just exploring this place, right? Like we have this place and all the sorts of things that are kind of like attached to this place without being like a structured adventure, right? It's in that kind of like middle spot between a starter and a module, and I think that's actually kind of a cool sweet spot for a zine.
I was gonna say, I think that's a sweet spot just for running Dungeon World.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, I like the real light touch starters as well. Like those are helpful, but I also sometimes like the detail. I mean, you're running Anglekite, which is, definitely like got a lot more like specific, detail to it. I run OSR modules in Dungeon World, which are very, very deep mapped out, right? So you can do both, right? The Dungeon World's good at like in either mode of play, like this more like a more extemporaneous style of play, or a more like sort of guided style of play. And I think you're right. Like the style of this scene, Swordbreaker, and of Plundergrounds, like this sort of middle place is it's a really, really nice sweet spot that the system really sings in, I think.
Yeah. So this issue, like it's got a lot for its 14 page length. It's got a dungeon starter, 5 items, 5 enemies, 5 hirelings, 3 moves, and then a compendium class. So you're like,
yeah, there's a lot tucked in there, and it's all kind of themed around this like Baron's castle, which I think is pretty cool. I wanted to read the custom move related to the Baron, because that's my that's one of my favorite things about it, and not just because it's based off one of my own custom moves. So I had a custom move that has a sort of like minor, tiny quasi fame in the Dungeon World community called the Labyrinth move. We covered it 100 years ago on the show, but he has adapted my Labyrinth move for this move called Searching for the Throne Room. Okay, the original Labyrinth move, if you'll recall, listeners, was about getting to the center of a vast labyrinth, right? And it was a move that sort of abstracted that process out. This is something pretty similar. It reads like this: when you search for the throne room in the Twisted Castle ruins, choose a leader and have them roll plus wisdom. On a 10+, describe the terrain you travel through, and the party holds 1. On a 12+, they hold 2. On a 7 to 9, the party holds 1, but the GM will introduce a hazard: rickety bridge, treacherous slope, tight squeeze, or something nasty only they can dream up. On a 6-, the Baron's minions or random monsters attack the party while they are dealing with one of the hazards. At any time, the party may spend 1 hold to come across a cache of valuables or resources. Describe the area containing this cache. At any time, the party may spend 1 hold to encounter the Baron, because they are headed in the right direction and can hear the rattling armor of his knights. If the party defeats the Baron 5 times, they have reached the throne room. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that move. The implementation of it is very nice. It sets a nice pacing mechanic for this adventure, and I think that's very, very wise. I really was into the items that he made. And it's a small thing. It's a subtle thing. I don't know if you noticed it, but under his items, he has their coin values. So you could potentially sell these or maybe even have them for sale at an interesting shop if your players are those kinds of players who like to go to shops. Thought that was cool.
Yeah, one of them I thought was really good called, it's not really a magic item, it's just a regular item, but it's called a bag of forged documents, right? And
yeah,
it reads, when you look for just the right passport, invitation, credential, or other documentation, you find it. Mark off one use. I love this because it takes the core rules, which in this case would be the bag of books, right, that you can get, that's normally a part of the gear that you can get in the game, and kind of like adapts that a little bit. Like, I think that shows like really sort of practical but also creative thinking, like taking like kind of what's in the game and adapting it for what you need it to be. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a clever use of the abstraction principle that is part of Dungeon World. Good use of it. It's also like tied into his CC where they can like make forged documents, which was neat. And then I think the item that I'm like really, really dig is kind of the namesake of this zine. It's the Swordbreaker, which is a weapon that was once used to disarm and break weapons because it has all these notches in it. And he does a cool job describing it. But mechanically, what he has it do is it adds additional options to hack and slash. And I hadn't seen like a weapon or item that did that. I think that's a really neat idea. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Like, you could do that with so many things. And that just changed my perspective on how items might work in Dungeon World. And so kudos. That's awesome.
Yeah. This zine is, it shows lots of like really smart thinking about Dungeon World, right? And I think that's what I really like about it. Like, you can tell Logan is really, it feels like Dungeon World 2.0, right? Like, it feels like a sort of like slightly advanced or more like deep thinking about what Dungeon World can be and what can do. So I'm really into this. I think it's pretty cool, despite it's like somewhat, like DIY production values.
Yeah, like don't let that fool you. This is good
setting
stuff.
That aside, like it's substantively it's quite good. And I think it's on drive-thru for pay what you want. So go check it out.
Yeah, I mean, pay what you want. Like, you can't go wrong.
Right. Yeah. I think it's worth a couple bucks at least. I mean, it's got so much cool stuff in it. So I would heartily recommend it.
Yeah. And I mean, if he keeps up the pace with releasing this, you could be running these adventures pretty much just, it's like farm to table.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be. Jason, this week I thought we might talk about one of the basic moves, one of the moves that kind of just helps facilitate play a little bit, and that's aid or interfere.
Yeah.
So we run aid or we play with flags, not bonds, and the original as written aid or interfere, the bonds.
Right. You roll plus number of bonds that you have with the character that you're going to aid or interfere. Yeah.
Right. You roll plus bonds. I mean, the way that we do it with flags, it's easy. We just roll with like the stat that seems relevant.
Right. Yeah. It's a pretty simple fix. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's like always the question of like, do you roll before or after?
What do you do? Do you do before or after?
I usually let, like, as I said, like, this is usually something to just kind of facilitate the adventure. So I usually let them roll after, unless I'm really interested. Yeah, unless I'm really, really interested in the bad outcome.
I do after for a reason, because for one thing, I don't think it breaks anything to let the players decide afterwards if they want to do the aid, right, or the interfere, I suppose. But like the aids when it comes up more often, right? I think it's okay because they still are exposing themselves, right? If they hit a 7 or 9 or whatever, they're still kind of exposing themselves by doing the roll afterwards, or if they get a 6, right? So I think literally nothing is gained by like making a strategic decision before the roll that you're going to aid or interfere. And furthermore, doing it afterwards speeds up play too, because if you make them do it before the roll, then you have to deal with the conversation of, well, do you want aid? Well, how can I aid? Okay, we're going to do all that stuff. And then the person rolls and they get a 7 and the aid won't even matter. Right. So just do it afterwards when it's actually going to be helpful. Right.
Yeah. I just kind of get a little bit over the like after the fact. I can aid. I want to aid. Okay,
it doesn't bug
how are
me
you
at all.
aiding?
Like if they're on a 6 or a 9, which is the only two instances when it matters anyway, it doesn't bug me. I mean, because I actually like the sort of I do make them work for it, right? It's like, well, you better show me how you were aiding, like if you want that to fire off, right? So I think it leads to okay conversations. If nothing else, doing it afterwards, like I said, avoids the possibility that it's just totally meaningless, right? Which happens a lot. So
yeah, I prefer that they in fiction be like, oh, I think my character's helping them do that thing, and then I'm like, all right, let's see their role, and then if they need it, they'll.
I think that's actually in practice. That's what happens at my table too. Like someone describes themselves aiding, but we don't do the role unless they need
they need it. Yeah, that's how I prefer to handle it. But I don't I occasionally will let people after the fact be like, do you want to aid them?
I've done that too. Yeah, I've done a retcon. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, but the real meat of the topic with this one is recently Jeremy Strandberg posted on Dungeon World Tavern. Yeah, he's working with Jason Lutz for the Stone Top, which is kind of an expansion deviation on Jason Lutz's Perilous Wilds. He was talking about the aid or interfere move and asking people to playtest a revised version of it with him. And I thought it was interesting, so I thought I'd bring it up on the show and see what you thought.
Okay. How does it go?
Yeah, so the way that he has his aid or interfere go, I'll read aid, and if you want to read interfere, then we can talk about it.
Sounds good.
When you help another character who is about to roll for a move, tell us how you do it. If everyone agrees that it would help, roll a d6, and they can use your roll in place of one of their dice. Regardless of whether they use your die, you are exposed to any risk, cost, or consequence associated with the roll. When you jump in to help another character who just rolled, tell us how you plan to do it and ask the GM what else is required or what the consequences will be. If you accept, increase the ally's roll by +1.
That's interesting. The first part of it reminds me a lot of Slade's game, right? I mean, the indie hack, because that's how the indie hack works, right? You roll a die and they can choose to take it or not take it, right? Depending on how it goes. That's kind of cool. I like that it automatically exposes the other person to to possible negative consequences, or they are exposed to the risk and consequences regardless, whether they get a 7 to 9 or not. So, or a 6 minus. So
I like that. This is basically, rolling plus advantage. That other games are starting to do, and I think I like that PBTA.
That is a thing lately.
Yeah.
Rolling. Yeah. Listeners, rolling, a lot of PBTA games coming out are, instead of doing +1 forward, they're doing roll with advantage, which is you roll 3 dice and take the 2 best.
Right, or roll with disadvantage, where you roll 3 dice and take the worst 2.
Yeah, it's pretty clever. I think it's a pretty slick way of. It's slick and it's a little more elegant in terms of managing that, because a lot of people forget about the +1s and the -1s. So.
Yeah. So the other part of this that I kind of like is it has different outcomes if you choose to help beforehand, or if they already rolled and you're trying to jump in and help at the last minute.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I definitely would want to see it in play to see how it kind of affects the table talk, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Let's look at the interfere move too.
Sure. When you try to foil another character's move, say how you do it and roll, plus strength if you use brute force, plus dex if you move quickly or employ finesse, plus con if you hold steady or suck it up, plus int if you exploit a relevant detail or expertise, plus whiz if you had a feeling they'd do this, plus charisma if you rely on subterfuge, charm, or wiles. On a 10 plus, they pick one from the list below. On a 7 to 9, they pick one, but if they let you foil their move, then you are off balance, exposed, or otherwise left vulnerable. Ask them what they do next. The choices are you do it anyway, but take a -2 to the roll, or you relent, change course, or otherwise allow their move to be foiled.
I like that it's not reliant on bonds.
Right, yeah.
That's a plus. I like that it has a more, fictional tie-in than just a -2. It's more like a more meta conversation at the table has to occur. Will I do this thing or not? We don't do a lot of we don't do a lot of PvP, but this would let you do a bit more in a more safe way.
I think so, yeah. As I'm reading it, I see where he's going with all this, and it all makes sense to me. I definitely would want to try it out. I might try it out my next game and see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm gonna, when I start back in Anglekite, I'm gonna use this aid and interfere structure, and I will let Jeremy know how it goes, but that'll be some time from now. But yeah, I'm into it. I want to see how it goes, because I kind of really like the aid. I want to see if my players end up interfering with each other. I want to see what that looks like and how that works.
Well, and again, echoing our last segment, I love this like sort of like advanced thinking about Dungeon World that's going on, right? Like I really love that. I love that that's a thing that certain parts of the Dungeon World community are embracing. I think we're a big part of that, right? Because that's a big part of what this show does, is like kind of think about how you can take Dungeon World to like a different level, or use the core concepts of Dungeon World to get better play or whatever, or to kind of twist it around to get better play. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool in that way.
Yeah, ADW.
Yes, exactly, right. Yeah, Advanced Dungeon World is pretty good. I would go straight to second edition, Advanced Dungeon World second edition. So
Advanced Dungeon World second edition. That's all I really wanted to talk about it. I don't really have any other thoughts about Aid or Interfere beyond that, but I think this move that he is playtesting is an interesting, fresh look at the whole situation.
Yeah, and I'll point listeners to a really early episode of the show. I don't have the number handy, but I'll include a link somewhere, where I think we talked about PvP, right? Didn't we talk about like effective ways of handling PvP in Dungeon World? I think we have. We have. Yeah, I will try to find that when I'm putting the show notes together, because I do think that is something that is not explained well in the Dungeon World book, and your table will really benefit by understanding how PvP kind of works in all Powered by the Apocalypse games, or at least most of them, including Dungeon World. So I'll try to find that and give that to you guys.
Awesome. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here is Useful or Valuable to Me.
Okay, listeners, we are launching a brand new contest. So this is going to be a shrine contest, okay? So a shrine contest. Here are the details. What we want is a god, preferably a unique god. Could be a saint, it could be some kind of like entity, it could be some kind of demon or patron, or an actual like, just a straight up god. I mean, just something like that, some kind of higher power. Okay,
something you would worship
or pray to, right? So 400 words max on these entries. All right, what you're going to give us is a description of the entity or the god that the shrine is focused on. Ideally, a description of what the shrine looks like as well. A custom move associated with the shrine, one spell, and one magic item. Okay. Alternatively, 2 magic items instead of a spell. Your choice. So, shrine, custom move associated with the shrine, a spell and a magic item, or 2 magic items. Obviously, the spell and magic item should be thematically connected to the god of the shrine, right? So we have done some stuff like this a little bit on the show before. We had one of the dwarf shrines from Codex Iron. Rakrin presides over the places that dwarves fear, particularly the damp caves at the edges of their cities and the dark subterranean rivulets that bring water and carry waste away. Rakrin favors the foolhardy, the curious, and the melancholic, none of whom are considered virtuous by dwarven society. Rakrin's strongest desire is to have dark secrets revealed and for the long dead to be remembered. The deeper you delve in search of Rakrin, the more you feel the water coursing and carving through rocks. Before reaching a shrine to Rakrin, this great flow pounds in your head like a blinding, migraine pitch drumming. Now here's the custom move. When, weeping, you prostrate yourself before the stalagmite shrine of Rakrin, which is covered in green bioluminescent fungi, roll plus charisma. On a 10+, feel the waters of the earth coursing like the blood in your veins as you obtain knowledge of all the damp, uninhabited passages at the fringes of dwarven civilization. Ask 2. On a 7 to 9, as above, but ask 1. All answers will be confined to activities and events on the fringes. Rakrin has no interest in the busy world of the dwarven cities or the bright lands above. And here are the questions. Where have the dead things been laid to rest unceremoniously? What is about to burst forth like a pent-up flood? Where are the treasures that have been abandoned to time? What beings move along the damp corridors? What tools are buried deep in the muck? Take a +1 forward when acting on the answers.
Here's the spell that he wrote for it. Cleric level 1 spell, Whispering Winds. By speaking at the correct volume and pitch, your voice may be heard in any location that is both currently quiet and connected by these caverns. It is nearly impossible for the hearer to determine the source of the sound. The spell lasts until you next make camp. And here's the item. The Aeolian Necklace. This small iron whistle, tied with simple twine, sounds when the winds of time and fate pass through it. If anyone the character fears or admires approaches the black gates, there's no indication of exactly who, a small whistling tone is heard. Moving towards the body itself increases the volume of the sound. The pitch indicates whether the traveler is returning, upwards if yes, downwards for no.
Awesome. So, listeners, that's what we're looking for. What we just read to you is about 400 words. So, just a reminder, 400 words for your entries. If you are the winner, you will receive a $50 gift card to either Amazon or Drive-Thru, your choice. Also, we'll be inviting both the winner and 2 runners-up onto the show, just like we did with the last contest. One other note, too, because I'm going to save myself some trouble later here. If you submit an entry into the contest, you agree to let us use it for Codex, because I think I might want to put all these in Codex at some point, and I don't want to have to ask you guys individually. So if you submit, just know that, all right?
Awesome. And how long do we want to let this one run for?
I think we're going to run this one, through May.
Sounds good. All right. I can't wait to see what you guys bring to the table. You always bring such interesting items.
It's fun.
And
I love the
other
contest.
things.
I think they're great.
And I want to see what kind of things you think people get up to worshiping. Let's move on to our next segment.
This episode of Discern Realities is being sponsored by Scablands Press. David and I would like to extend our congratulations to Slade from Scablands on his recent Kickstarter for Dust, Fog, and Glowing Embers. This was Slade's first Kickstarter project, and he ended with 368 backers, and he hit several stretch goals, including a series of adventure locations by myself and my co-hosts on the Gauntlet podcast, Rich Rogers and Kate Bullock, as well as a setting called The Burial Mounds by Thomas Novosel. If you didn't get a chance to back the Kickstarter for Dust, Fog, and Glowing Embers, keep your eyes open for when it becomes generally available. In addition to the stretch goals I mentioned, the book also features art by Dirk Detweiler-Leichty and a layout by Ollie Jeffrey, both of whom I have worked with on the Gauntlet Zine Codex and who are just amazing. So congrats again to Slade, and thanks to Scablands for sponsoring our show.
Our next segment is What is About to Happen.
This is our ongoing comic strip AP featuring the adventures of Ramshackle Crow. And when we last saw Ramshackle, he and Scabs and Urbina were making camp for the night. You have not yet had a chance to heal. You were on watch when you noticed that there is a gigantic face beneath the position that you guys are on. You guys are in this sort of like floating platform, this room that's kind of hanging in black inky space. There is a sort of like ambient light in the space, but it's quite vast, and it looks like a clockwork, like there's gears and spinning belts and things like that, right? And this face, I'll remind you, has eyes as big as football fields, okay? It has a massive white beard that looks like it's the size of like a great roaring river, okay? And it's rising up from beneath, up toward you all. And as it rises up, it does so surprisingly quietly. You just feel it's like furnace-like breath, not furnace-like, but just very like heavy, gale-like breath, right? Going in and out, in and out. As he rises up, the cogs, the gears, the clockwork bits that are kind of floating in the air all around you, they begin to fall away and spread away as if to make room for this being, okay? It's terrifying, right? I mean, it's not just a head, it's a whole body too. How are you feeling right now, Ramshackle?
Very, very nervous, very, very small, very unprepared, and very, very vulnerable and exposed.
All true. As it's rising up, the head, the eyes are going past you. You can't even see all of it at once, right? Like the scope of your vision is not enough to take up. You're to take in the entire head or face. You know, you can only look at bits of it at a time. The nose, the left eye, the right eye, the forehead. It does appear to be, though, like an old man, a very, 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 very titanic old man. As it rises up, a single massive eye like stares at you and like goes and continues moving upwards. And you begin to see the body, which in your field of vision just looks like a vast expanse of flesh. But you have to turn your head all around to get the full view of what you're looking at. The body is the torso, which is what you can kind of see. Appears to have no clothing on. It's bare. And it's covered in tattoos. It's just covered in tattoos all along the arms, the shoulders, the chest. The tattoos display scenes, like scenes of characters all over its body.
Are these like small tattoos, or are these like human-sized tattoos, or are these like as big as he is?
The smallest tattoos are as big as you.
Okay.
Roll discern realities, though, if you're kind of paying really close attention, checking it out.
9.
Go ahead and ask one question.
What here is not what it appears to be?
You will notice that the tattoos all have a unifying theme. They depict scenes from your life. How do you know that? Tell me how you know that. Tell me a couple of the scenes that you see displayed in tattoo form. And they're kind of like, they're not like perfect replicas of you, you know? Like they're more like kind of simplistic, almost iconographic images of you, right? But you can make out details that are like pretty clearly, obviously like scenes from your life. And you can tell that the main character that's featured in most of these are you. What do you see?
I see growing up on the streets. I see the moment where Cat's Paw first found me. I see the moment when the Ramshackle predecessor found me. I see the massive diamond necklace that I stole from the Baroness that I gave to him to achieve the rank of Crow. And then I see, as he's like getting higher and higher, I see when I died. And a little depiction of Urbina is like hiding up in the corner.
Yeah, that's good. Speaking of that, you hear a distinct hissing sound, also coming somewhere from the vicinity of this creature's chest. What do?
I can't see what's hissing.
You can kind of hear it. You might have to kind of poke around a little bit or angle yourself a little bit to see where it might be coming from.
Where is its chest? Like, is it way up above me?
Yeah, you're kind of like at this point you're kind of like down by the abdomen, right? And he's got a very like ripped abdomen, and each one of his little 6-pack segments is like the size of like a building, right?
This is where I will alert my companions, at least.
This is gonna freak Scabs out, right? I mean, Scabs gets scared at every little like.
I'm not gonna wake Scabs up. Scabs can keep sleeping.
Okay.
But I want to see what Urbina's take on all of this is.
She's already like looking out, like she's gone as far as she can go. As you recall, you had her like kind of tied up like a donkey, right, on a rope, and so she can't get very far out of the room that you guys came out of. But she's like she's as close as she can go, like staring out already. And she says, "Ramshackle, do you see it? Do you see what I see?"
I was hoping it was just my imagination.
She's like, "Whoa, this is madness. I mean, I'm looking. I'm looking at a scene when my brothers and my sister and I were celebrating my mother's birthday the year before she.
Wait. You're seeing tattoos from your life. I see tattoos from my life.
And then her eyes get wide, and she says, "Ramshackle, look. In the beard."
I'll look.
If you look in the beard, you will see the Starlight Serpent is crawling, weaving in and out of this entity's beard, gradually going up the beard, kind of like toward its mouth. You can see its glittering mirrored scales. You can see its its sparkling black eyes, the last thing you saw before you died in the prime material plane, right?
Just slack-jawed, cannot believe this is what's happening. I don't want anything to do with that damn snake.
She says, "Ramshackle, I don't know what's happening, but I think this might be the end."
That just leaves one final question. Who's really in control here?
We are a production of the Gauntlet gaming community. Our website is gauntlet-rpg.com. We also have a really terrific G+ community. Just search for the Gauntlet. We are on Twitter at GauntletRPG, and if you'd like to support us on Patreon, we'd love that. It's patreon.com/gauntlet.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.
Plus int if you exploit a relevant detail or expertise. Plus whiz if you had a feeling they'd do this. Plus charisma. I'm not going to say plus cha. Plus charisma if you rely on subterfuge, charm, or wiles.
I wish you hadn't said plus whiz.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. Yeah, I caught it. Yeah, I know. I thought that too. I was like, oh, that sounds terrible.